and I couldn't read with them in. And I was never able to sleep in the costume because I would crush the hair and the makeup would stick to a phone. It was like being encapsulated for about 16 hours for 7 years. It was an arduous task to deal with all that crap.
Now, just as an aside, Bob Picardo was also on the Neelix.
Yes, he was.
And he'll probably tell the story when he's here in May. But for him, the makeup was a major disincentive. Well, he said he actually called Mike and said, "Mike, tell me what is involved here." And he didn't like what he heard.
No, he didn't. He had worked with a lot of makeup before that.
Yeah.
I've subsequently worked with more makeup. The worst was Caveman, short-lived TV show where they used makeup called silicone, which is a brand new way to go now. And silicone is beautiful makeup. It looks like flesh. You don't have to light it in any special way. It feels like flesh. It's organic. It moves like flesh. But it takes twice as long to apply. And it's twice as warm. But it is the way to go now. So, but any questions about the thing that amazed me about the show was how existential it was. In the sense that he, in spite of the fact that there may be no God and there may be no afterlife, he decides we have to do our duty anyway. We have to live as good people, even though we don't know what's coming up. And I love that. I love that message. You know, a friend of mine was emailing me the other day, this lady I know in Maine, and she closed her letter with, "By the way, what do you think the purpose of life is?" And she was talking about this and that, and then she said, "Okay, Kat." So I wrote back my favorite, what I think is the purpose of life is a quote from Plato, which you probably know, maybe you know, which is to be kind, because everybody is fighting a great battle. And that's what I think is the whole deal. Whatever reward is coming up with us or not, you know, the point is I don't want to sow any harm while I'm here, you know. I want to be of service and do the best I can. And I think that's what Neelix came to conclude. And if there is something, that's great. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm in the Army National Guard, and of course we had our mandatory briefings. One of the mandatory briefings last weekend was suicide prevention. And of course Neelix showed some of the signs that he was in suicidal tendencies. Of course his Commander Chakotay, of course, went over there as the supervisor and took over the situation and tried to help out the crew member.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, there's a question. So, yeah. Now that bothered me a little bit about the episode. I understand you only had so much time to resolve prevent attention. That after Neelix has just, come literally this close to committing suicide, 15 seconds later, everything's okay, and we're going to let him leave and walk off and go see Naomi. Pastors have very basic psychological counseling training, and we're always, what's impressed upon us is the limits of what we can do. It's a triage kind of situation, and do no harm. We aren't supposed to try to push beyond what our competency level is. And I have encountered, I've been in situations with people who were suicidal, and I've said, "Excuse me for a second," I've gone out and I've called 911, and I said, I have a suicide risk in my hands here. And so it bothered me a little bit that we were going to let Neelix just go now. There's no more suicide risk. Everything's fine. We have to resolve the episode. But just from kind of a professional standpoint, I thought, whoa, Chakotay, you may be out of your element here. You may need to find somebody who can come in and deal with, the back half of this issue.
We have Counselor Troy on the ship.
Yeah, right. I was kind of the counselor, Troy.
Who counsels the counselor?
Counselor.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, the suicidal aspect of it. think he was, I never looked at it like he was trying to kill himself so much as he was trying to correct the wrong that 7 of 9 had done.
Yeah.
She somehow interrupted the natural flow of things. He really believed he was dead, I think, and he should have stayed that way. He didn't feel he had a right to come back. And that was compounded by his despair at the same time. Maybe color didn't make him decide that, but it was resolved very quickly. But like Curtis said, you had to wrap up the show, I would have liked to have seen that scene go on a little bit more. As it was pretty long.
It was a long scene.
For a television show.
Definitely. But a very dramatic scene. We're on the edges of our seats.
Yeah.
Now, we know that you signed a contract, so obviously the character is coming back next week.
Yeah. I remember doing that. It was so easy to just go like that, and I had to force myself not to. It's like, it was actually a weird scene to play, I remember, because he was obviously, the only way I could justify it was that he had reservations.
Mm-hmm.
Once Chakotay started talking to him, he was being brought back, and that's what, he just couldn't do it,
There's 5% of it that still hopes there's, and I guess, talking about what Chakotay had handed off to somebody else, Chakotay had become his spiritual guide,
Yes.
his guru. If there was anybody who was going to talk him back down from it, it was going to be Chakotay.
Did any of you guys see a film called The Bridge? A documentary? Very intense film. It's a documentary. These filmmakers trained their cameras on the Golden Gate Bridge for a year, way away from the bridge. Some of you are shaking your heads. And they recorded 24 leaps. And it's not a snuff film. It's not a death film at all. It's actually, what's interesting about it is they show us, there's a few images that are tough to take, but they interview the people who are involved in the lives of these people who have jumped, their family members and their friends and stuff, to see what made them come to this decision to make it, to do away with themselves. But the thing I bring it up because there was one guy who lived, who survived, because he jumped, and right after he jumped, he regretted the fact that he had done it. And he said, oh my God, I've made the biggest mistake of my life. And what he did was he situated himself in such a way that he would land and not kill himself. And he didn't kill himself. He broke a lot of bones in his body, but he survived. And they talked to him, they interviewed him after, and it's a pretty amazing interview. That's the closest I've ever seen in life to anything like that happening, where somebody has decided something like that and then regretted it. Bridge, yeah. Eerie thing, too.
I can imagine. Well, this was a Brian Fuller script,
Yes, it was.
which in part accounts, I think, for why it's such a great episode. Brian Fuller also did an episode called March of the Dead that I would love to do March of the Dead sometime in this series. With Roxanne, or maybe with Brian, if, the God should smile upon us that way. It was gratifying to see that Brian is talking about maybe a new series, and I think if there's a guy to do it, he's the one. But Brian Fuller with March of the Dead and now Pushing Daisies really explores death, issues of death.
And Dead Like Me.
Yeah, and I think he really nails kind of what you're talking about, the existential angst around this. And there are little nuggets of lines in this episode that you could take that nugget and, there's a master's thesis right there. The observation, what was the line? The line's now popping out in my head. But basically, that we create religion and we create the afterlife because we are scared of death. And from an existential standpoint, the only way to get through life, knowing that we are going to die, is to have some sort of